the Finance Committee. Folks, we have a very, very full agenda. I'm going to do my best to keep everybody on task and to be finished by the appointed time of 6 o'clock. With that, we will get right into it. Are there any items on the consent that anyone would like pulled? Mr. Montgomery.
C2 and C3.
C2 and C3. Ms. Burke.
I want C1A.
C1A.
And I want C2, C3, let's see.
Yeah.
C4.
C4.
And I want CA. I don't know, I think it's a K.
C8.
A. C. A. Like A, B, C.
Uh-huh.
A. And I want B, I believe that, and F. And C10.
Okay, the A, B, and F, what's the number before that?
6.
C6.
6. C6, A, B, and F, and C10. All right, I'm going to repeat all those. C1A, C2, C3, C4, C6, A, B, F, and C10. Seeing no other hands in the air, do I have a motion to approve the balance?
I move for approval of the balance.
We have a motion second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. We will begin with consent on item C1A. If the Secretary read that, please.
Resolution authorizing the purchase of property located at 2394 Winter Haven Lane as a site for Police District 300, located in the Southwest Ward, in the amount of $650,000.
Ms. Burke, you asked for this one.
Yes, I felt was something, it needs to be made public. And why we're going to where we're going.
Okay. Mr. Borland, are you here today? Or Mr. Turner, can someone comment on this?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, City Council, as you may recall, has requested that staff look at locations for police districts around the city. Mm-hmm. There are 3 identified areas. We have selected 2 already, and there was still a desire for a 3rd location somewhere in the western part of the city. This is the area around the Haynes Mall Boulevard, Stratford Road area, Jonestown Road area, and we have selected a site on Stratford Road at the Hillcrest development. $650,000 is the negotiated price, and we've gotten direction from council on what we should offer. This is consistent with that direction, therefore we're recommending your approval.
Mr. Turner, just for the edification of the folks, where are the other 2 going to be located?
The other 2 locations are on Waughtown Street at the old Lucia site and on North Point Boulevard in front of the post office.
Thank you. The question, Ms. Burke.
Yeah, no, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to make a comment. We've been talking about having these for quite some time. And with our city growing, this is something we need to do. Mr. City Manager, the reason I asked for something like this, and I've said before, you put it in a consent agenda, but I think for public awareness, we need to make the public aware of it. Mm-hmm. So I didn't have any comments to be against it. I just wanted for the awareness, and so I'll move for approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed likewise. We will now go to consent agenda C2. If they'll read that, please.
Resolution adopting guidelines for affordable workforce housing assisted with city funds.
Mr. Brooks, why don't you take the microphone? Why don't you just fill everybody in real quick?
Good afternoon, Chairman, Mayor, members of the committee. This particular item is a policy that would provide guidelines for an affordable workforce housing policy. So when funds are derived solely from the use of city funds, there would be guidelines regarding the use of those funds with respect to providing a portion of the projects, other units, affordable to low and moderate income individuals. As you all know, projects funded with federal funds have to meet certain restrictions already based on income. Then there may be other sources of federal funds that could have some requirements with those funding sources that have to be used. Currently, when there are only city funds involved, we don't have any guidelines, and this would provide that whenever units are being created using city funds only, that in general, at least 5% of the total units must be leased to households whose income are between 50% and 80% of median, and at least 5% of the total units rented to incomes between 80 and 120% of median. And for those of you who are interested in knowing what those guidelines are, currently 50% of median income for a household of 4 is $28,050, and 80% is $44,900. 120% would be for a family for $67,300.
So what is the median household income for 4?
Median income for a family of 4 would be 80% would be $44,900.
Well, what's 100% of it? Somebody do that.
100% would be $56,000.
We're saying that the median income for a household of 4 is $56,000.
Yes.
All right. All right. A number of people had questions. I'll just start with Ms. Montgomery. We'll go around the table.
I'll save mine until.
All right, Ms. Adams, you next.
Yes, Mr. Brooks, I don't know why that number doesn't sound correct to me, and I know your office would know more than I would about it, but every meeting recently I've been in, even with the Congresswoman and others, it seems that the median for this area was hitting around 40,000 or something like that. I mean, I've heard that in this group here. So that goes back to, again, Mr. Garrity, what I've been saying along. We got to make sure that we understand where we are when we're talking about median incomes of our citizens, you know?
Our income limits are provided by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and these are effective as of March 2015.
And I'm not saying that's not correct. I'm just saying between probably what I've seen in the paper, heard in some of these meetings, and with the Congresswoman, that's not the number that we've been hearing, and therefore that's a problem. So I guess going forward again, every time we talk about anything that has to do with median income, we need to be very clear that it's listed somewhere where everybody can look at it, because again, I'm not disputing your office and you. I know you know your job, but I'm concerned again because the information has not been correct coming to me and some of the members of the council.
Ms. Burke, and then the mayor had a comment on Ms. Adams' comment. Go
You
ahead.
want to comment behind?
You want, yeah.
Actually, I had another point to make as well, so I can wait there.
Okay, Ms. Burke, you're next.
When you said that figure, I was thinking about how many people we actually have in this community who could really actually get the housing with what we're hearing. Because when we look at what we have developed downtown and around downtown, we're not having enough of the income like that to live. And then my next question concerning this would be how many people we actually have in Winston-Salem that we would want to offer the opportunity to be in some of these units. We actually consider making those kinds of salaries.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's what's, and that would be a question that needs to be answered.
Yeah. Yeah. Mr. Mayor, you have a question,
Yeah,
comment?
I'm wondering, Councilmember Adams, I think you're right. The number we used this past week was 45,000. I'm wondering if that was a household of one, perhaps. I'm not sure, but we should go back and double check.
Definitely, excuse me, Mayor, and we need to make sure that when we are communicating information to our citizens or anyone else, that we are communicating information that they know is correct, meaning if we're talking about, because for me, I would say, okay, we're fudging numbers here. If you tell me 45, and that's what I heard at your event, and he's telling me now 60 or 50 or whatever, no one said one person, single person versus 2 versus 4 or whatever that number is.
Go ahead, Mr.
I'm
Mayor.
sorry.
Go ahead.
And just getting off, I wanted to say that I think it's a good program we're bringing forward to try to develop workforce housing. I do believe we've got to be really careful with this because we don't want to create situations where projects become financially infeasible. For instance, if you take a project that's got 200 units in it, and under these guidelines, we'd have to have basically 20 of those at affordable rates there. If you're thinking that it's going to rent them at market for $1,000, and you rent them at market rate for $600, that's $400 per unit, or basically $8,000 a month difference, or $96,000 a year difference. You think about that as a loss of income to the project and how much debt that would prevent the developer from being able to get for the project. I believe there is language in here that says that a developer, if it becomes financially unfeasible to do a project, could demonstrate why it's infeasible to do that. Is that right, Mr. Brooks?
There's some language, and the total number of units would be 10%. So they would have
10%. Yeah,
10%.
But the numbers I have are right. 20 units out of 200
Yeah.
would be necessary.
There is language that would provide, if this number could not be met, that the developer would have an opportunity to provide another combination that would yield at least 10%, meeting some low and mod category,
Right.
but not necessarily as it's broken out in here. It could be all 10% being between 80 and 50 and 80, or 80% being one number and 20% being another number. I think the main point here would be that at least 10% would fall within these categories some type of way.
And again, I think we're creating a situation where we could have some projects that become infeasible because of these requirements, because when a developer starts building a building or a project, he's got to pay basically the same for the shell. There'd probably some savings on some upfit for maybe a more market rate cost building or unit. But so I'm just saying we need to be very, very cautious on how we do this.
Okay, Ms. Burke.
Now, I would not agree that we need to be cautious, but this city has not moved forward with housing as we should. We have been very lenient in how we work with these people who come in who want money. And then if we have to be careful that we will decrease the numbers, then we're going to be back where we were in the beginning. How many people are we actually saying that we want to, for the ones who have problems with income, but still want to give them housing that's decent? Are we going to go anywhere with it, or just have some words? That's what I'm concerned about. You know, if you say 10%, cut it to 10%. Just see these developers come into our city. I want to be polite to them, just as I want them to be polite to the taxpayers' dollars. I think we ought to stop. Just look at this city and see where we are and where we're not. And we've given so many dollars, Mr. Chairman. You're the chairman of this finance committee, and a lot of it is on your shoulders to make sure that we are moving in the right direction to provide these opportunities for people if we really want to provide them.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Montgomery's been patient.
Yes, this is a program and a policy, particularly a policy that I am happy that we have now broached to this place. It is one that I've championed up until this moment, and my colleagues and even others in this community know that anytime we have a conversation or any dialogue in reference to housing, whether it's in downtown or any other part of this city, that I'm going to ask a question in reference to affordability of that. Particularly when we begin to look at our downtown development and we look at the dollars that taxpayers pay to put into projects, there's a necessity that those projects begin to reflect and resemble what our community looks like. If not, what we create is a neighborhood and community that is not what we tell everybody is. And all the time we say our downtown is for everybody. Well, everybody can come and work, whether they're working the front desk as a receptionist or mopping the floors or a clerical person, but everybody can't live downtown because it's not affordable. And yes, we can talk about the social structure of things and education and go and get you a promotion, all of that. But that receptionist that works at the desk should have the same opportunity to walk to work as that person who they're working for. And this is just simply saying that what we're protecting is we're protecting the fact that we want our community, both from the housing standpoint, to be reflective of that. So nothing in the face of any developers, and I agree to the fact that sometimes it can cause issues within the project in terms of the dollar amounts. But what this is saying to anybody who comes, you come with a project understanding that this is something we're requesting. The thing that I am not interested in is where simply because you can state that it's not going to be economically feasible, that you're no longer bound by the requirements, because I can make anything not look economically feasible. But how do we get to that place to actually say, as a community, this is something that's important? Because if not, we have a gated community. Only those who have can live and work and play in something that everybody in the community is paying for. And it is our responsibility to make sure that that is protected as an opportunity, and not throwing this up in the face of developers saying we don't want to see good business, we don't want to see good investment, we don't want to see the tax base increase, because all of those are great things. But it's the fact that we're now saying you have to come to the table, and this is going to be a required conversation that has to happen if you want these dollars. If not, go to BB&T, Bank of America, one of those individuals, and get the financing for the project. If you want taxpayer dollars to be a part of it, there's going to have to be some conversations about how the greater community is going to benefit from that beyond the tax base increase of the investment. And I think that's a genuine conversation that we have to have based upon the issues that we have in our community now in terms of quality housing across the board. And we have an opportunity as a council and as a community to make a real statement, and not one that I think impedes development, but one that says this development is going to be done with respect to our entire community. And the only question that I do have is in reference to the timing. It says it is a 15-year requirement that these places would be in effect. And I've had this conversation with staff and others that I would like to see some language that allows for an opportunity for those dates to be extended into the future. Reason being is that if we only have affordability or workforce housing for 15 years, what happens after that 15 years? It goes that they're more than likely going to increase that back up to a market rate. And you find yourself in a community right back in the same place that you were before, not having affordable units. And so how do we create it in a way where we're consistently having those workforce units available to the community beyond that time frame? Because 15 years from now, whether or not those who are sitting around this table are sitting around the table or not, there's still going to be the need for housing in downtown around this community. And in fact, there's probably going to be an increased need. And so that's my concern in terms of after 15 years, what is going to happen? There's nothing that speaks to how we continue to do that in the future for those units. And not sure how we negotiate and navigate that, but in past conversations it was how we play a role, whether it's additional financial pieces that's there, but that's something that needs to be a part of the dialogue beyond that 15-year period. What happens?
Mr. McIntosh had his hand up.
I do share the concern for lack of affordable housing downtown. I think if I was a 27-year-old now looking to buy a piece of property downtown and live, I couldn't like I was able to do when I was 27 years old. I do think we need to be very careful about combining economic development and community development. When we look at these deals like the ballpark deal, that's a deal that makes sense for the city, and we're not giving them money. We're providing funding for them, so we are not actually subsidizing them. We're helping them in their finance stack. And so I think when people say that we're giving money to developers downtown, if we're doing good economic development deals, we get that money back. So we are not actually giving money away. So I think it's important that we be very mindful, because if we start to place requirements on the private sector in development deals, I don't think we have the ability to control. I think people look at us as a community and say that it's too restrictive. We never get to talk to them because they just look at our city and say it's too restrictive. They don't come here and spend their money here. So I think we need to be really careful about how we...
Had some more hands up. Ms. Adams.
Yes. I hear what everyone is saying. I particularly heard what Councilman Montgomery, Councilmember Burke. Again, I think this council has been very, very lenient, have been very forthcoming in helping as the 20, 30 years have gone by to help Winston get back to its vitality in downtown Winston, to the hard work of staff and others coming up with these creative ideas and with council support as to how to make it work. But, you know, we are at a crossroad, not just in Winston, but in America. I just left a meeting in Raleigh, and we were having this same conversation that's being talked about all over the state. You can't create, again, going back, we have been saying since I've been on this council for 6 years that the perception of downtown, everybody loves it, but to some of us, it's a gated community. And if we aren't proactive in trying to correct something, It's not, I'm not saying it's bad, it's good, but we need to be better. And that's on a lot of things that I've heard my councilwoman over here say a lot of times. We create things, we do things, but we not only now, we're at the point we have to be better because the revenues are drying up. Developers and businesses are going to be looking to municipality tax dollars and assistance to get their projects done. And if we are not going to be fair and just and try to figure out an innovative way so that everybody can be part of the deal, then what you're going to get is you're going to get people backing down because they're listening to their constituents and they're seeing their constituents are not at the table. I'm here, but they're here with me. And if it's not congruent to what my constituents are requiring me to do or say, then I will be one of those people that would be backing down. And I can live with that. I can live with that.
Okay. Can I make a comment? Because I do have a big, big agenda today. I'd like to keep this in committee, if that's okay with everybody. Let me throw some things I want the staff to follow up on. First off, I think we need to officially define what and this is median, not medium, meaning the 50 midpoint. And I could say on some data, the median and median are very, very similar. On incomes, they may not be. If Bill Cates lived in Winston-Salem, our medium income would suddenly go way up because you got one guy making $10 billion and he gets averaged out, but that doesn't mean we're all living better. So let's define officially for the record, and I will accept the Department of Housing, whoever it is, number.
But we have to agree.
But part of that is, and I think Ms. Adams brought this up, are we going to use just a four-person family or a three-person or a two or a one? I think we needed to, if all those numbers are available, because I think it ties into here. We're saying 5% have to be between 50% and 80%. Well, how low does the owner need to go to achieve that? And what number does he come off of? As an example, I've heard some of these units rent in the $1,400 range. I think that's a one or two bedroom type place. I don't think I'm totally out of line with that number. Well, if someone's at 50% of the median, does that mean they get a 50% discount? And if that's still too expensive, what do we do? So I think there needs to be some fairly specific guidelines. And if somebody's making 120%, does that mean they pay above market or something? I mean, I'm surprised 56K is the official number, but if it is, I'm not sure anyone making 80% deserves a discount. That's a pretty good income, I would think. But anyway, I think we need to define all that, and what do we expect the developer to do with that number? Is he expected to prorate it down proportionally, or what's he supposed to do? Also, I had questions, how does he determine that? Is he going to take someone's face value, or are we going to ask him to research someone's income, and does he have to retest it every year in case someone got a raise or whatever? And what if no one applies? What if he says, okay, you can have it if your income is 50%, we'll give it to you at 50%. Well, that's still $700 a month. That may be too much for somebody. And then what do they do? So I just think we need to tighten this up a little bit here. And if it's okay with everybody, let's just keep it in committee. I can tell you I have heard the median income in this area, and every number is different.
Every number.
So let's agree on what it is for 2014, 13, whatever year we can get it for and go with that. Is that okay with everybody?
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, we will now. What's it?
Oh,
you
make my
go
comment.
ahead. Mr. Montgomery would like to make a closing comment.
And it's just in the fact that when we talk about investment in support of projects, when we use taxpayer dollars, it doesn't matter if it's a loan, it doesn't matter if it is new taxes generated by the property. Anybody who makes an investment in their house and their tax value goes up, they would love for us to give them that back in their project. When we do economic or community development, it is done in a way because of the need and what it's going to do for our community. And so I don't want us to mix that up in the sense that there is solely a benefit. If anyone comes to this table and there are dollars that go back to them, whether it comes out of a pot of dollars that are set aside for a housing project or new dollars that are received, that is a benefit that has value that we cannot say doesn't mean anything. Right. And we have to understand that clearly.
All right. So I think we've got the comments. We'll keep this in the committee. We'll now go to C3. Ms. Montgomery, I had your name beside this one, I believe.
Yes.
Will we read this one, please, first?
Resolution authorizing the City of Winston-Salem to apply for a fiscal year 2015 U.S. Department of Labor Youth Build Grant in the amount of $1,100,000.
Okay.
I had a question in references, because we talked about youth build in the past in terms of the type of training that we're doing with the individuals, and just wondering in this process if we are looking to integrate anything in reference to some of the technology and things that we're doing, or helping individuals get closer to those fields in this, or is the grant so constrained that this is only, in requesting the dollars, this is only what we can request for it to be spent in?
In this round of funding availability, there was a provision for an additional program component that's called Construction Plus, and it provides for other types of employment training, and you determine that by working with your workforce development boards, your community colleges, and you try to determine what jobs are available in your immediate area and the training that it takes to receive those jobs. So it may not necessarily be jobs in the high-tech, lab tech area that we've been discussing, but it's an opportunity to train individuals in areas other than construction. For instance, a recent notice we received talked about jobs being available in the medical profession, CNAs, medical coding. You had jobs in forklift, CDL driving, some jobs that dealt with airplane mechanics. So there were a host of different types of jobs that have already been researched to be jobs that are available in our immediate area that would be acceptable jobs for the youth bill added component that they've added this year. What we intend to do is to research some of those other types of more high-tech jobs to find out the availability of jobs in the area, of additional training that may be required that one could receive at the community college, and see if those jobs would then be acceptable to the Department of Labor to add to it. But we have every intent to explore opportunities with this grant, which is the first time that I'm aware of that they've extended this type of training, and it's in addition to construction. So construction would still be the major core of the training program, but you can set aside some dollars for additional types of training.
And I just found that to be important for us to examine that, because that's been, I think, a common theme from this council in terms of developing our workforce and training our workforce in a diversified field. And particularly the individuals that are worked within this youth bill are often those who have some challenges to going to get general work in education. And so by helping them get this training, it makes them more employable, which makes our community better in terms of having a larger place of individuals who are employable, but just not concentrated to the construction field. And I'll be excited to see what we're able to see come out of the different opportunities with the plus piece.
One of the additions that we've been able to add to this current year's grant is that individuals that have graduated and received their trade certification, there's a one-year follow-up program, and we were able to get approval to use remaining funds in the program to pay for additional training for those individuals in other areas where they are certifiable, and they call portable certificates that one could use. So we're exploring that, and we have a few individuals that are taking some additional certified training courses now at Forsyth Tech.
Ms. Burke, you had a question?
Yes, before President Obama mentioned tech skills, some years ago I was speaking about tech skills, because having a school system with a career center and having Forsyth Tech and still not having people who have been able to be employed, I guess Mr. Page and the mayor who work in this area, the mayor and then, of course, Mr. Page, and we always ask, show us the statistics. Even though you talk about what you're doing in construction work, we still need to know of the people that have gone through the programs, how many of them are really not employed. And I think when you get reports like this, city manager, we ought to have little statistics there so we can compare. And I think it would be a shame not to even talk about knowing what Forsyth Tech can offer. And we're saying now we're trying to prepare our citizens. And our workforce here is so limited with all these colleges, 3 of them, and a technical school, and a career center, and a high school.
Yes.
Ms. Adams.
Yes, I agree. I agree with Councilmember Burke about the data. I'd like to see data at least from 2012, 13, and 14. That'll give us the year over year as to how many people participated in these programs, who our partners have been that are getting funded to do this job, and what types of jobs, again, have the people that were participating that they were trained in, and if they actually have viable employment now. I'd also like to get a list, or council for us to get a list of the quote-unquote new jobs that were added or that now are part of it versus where we were a couple of years ago when we were talking about it. And I can say, with the help of council going to the Hill and our lobbyists, we have been talking about this to them when we were on the Hill with our representatives and our senators, that they needed to change this and make it up to date to where we are now. And I want to thank staff for that too. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Burke.
I had one other thing. I had earlier started meeting with the university and the community college, so I'm going to direct the city manager, let us have, and he needs to be talking with them, because I think having a presence and they speaking, I think this keeps us intact. It is the city's project. It was not followed through properly, and I'm assigning somebody different to work with you than when we first got started. All right,
If I could suggest, if we don't apply, we'll never get any money. So if we could approve the application, and that'll give staff whatever time you need to get some statistical information.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed likewise. And hopefully we will get the application. Okay, we'll now go to C4, and I wrote down B. Did I get that wrong? No, I think it's just C4. I think the B means Ms. Burke wanted this one.
No, it was really,
C4?
okay.
Any
C4.
questions?
Yeah.
Mr. Turner, you just want to give us a 1 minute what we got here?
Mr. Chairman, this is a grant application that's been approved from the North Carolina Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund for $3.3 million. It'll help us with the renovation work at the Archie Elledge wastewater treatment plant. It's 0% interest for 20 years, and it compares to bond rates that we would pay in excess of 3%. So a very good deal.
Very good deal. Any questions, comments, Ms.
No,
Burke?
I will move for approval, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion second. Any other questions, comments? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed likewise. That passes. We will now go to C6A. If y'all read that, please.
Resolution awarding contract for sidewalk improvements along Kirklees Road, Hartford Road, Chester Road.
Ms. Bates, if you'll come up. I saw you back there somewhere, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, make sure you read B along with A, because I'm going to speak about both of them together.
You want B also?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why don't you read B, because it's also for street resurfaces, and the other one sidewalks. Go ahead and read that.
And resolution awarding contract for resurfacing city streets awarded to APAC Atlantic Incorporated, Thompson Arthur Division.
Ms. Burke.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members of the committees and others here, the reason I asked for that to be brought up, we give out our tax dollars for people to do work on our sidewalks and our roads, and they are not doing the job as they should. You go back and you see driveways that have not been fixed properly. You see sidewalks are cracking before it's been there too long. And I think this city ought to do a better job, Mr. City Manager, to monitor these projects. We'll get calls, some of us, I can't get down my driveway. Why? Because when they came to do my street, they didn't do it right. So it's up to us, Mr. Chairman. That was the purpose for me bringing this. And then to give us some kind of report how we have inspected to make sure they're doing it right.
Okay, thank you.
And I can move for approval of A and B.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve A and B. Is there any other discussions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. We'll now go to C6F. Secretary, read that, please.
Resolution approving contract amendment for Griffith Enterprises to provide professional environmental services involving groundwater pollution in the area of 28th Street.
Mr. Turner, this is somewhat of a hot ticket item. Would you mind giving a minute explanation so everybody knows what we're talking about here?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the city has become aware of the fact that there is contamination in the groundwater and in the soil in the 28th Street, Indiana Avenue area. There's a lot of media coverage of it associated with the school in that area. But as city staff has reviewed the documents from the regulatory agencies, we have found that the data from 2007 is the most recent information on the levels of contamination. Contamination in soil and in groundwater tends to migrate, and since 2007, we felt that the soil and the soil contamination might have actually migrated into some of the residential neighborhoods south of 28th Street. We actually, at the staff authorized level, entered into a contract to gather soil and water samples in an area south of 28th Street. What those samples that we gathered indicated is that the plume of pollution may have moved even further south than we anticipated. Therefore, we need to have additional monitoring wells installed or sampling wells installed, and the amount of work that entails will exceed the staff authorized $100,000 limitation, so we're asking for council to approve additional contract work that's equivalent to $100,000.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Ms. Burke, I believe this is your ward.
This is the Northeast Ward, and the reason I asked us to bring this to the attention because some of the citizens feel that we have neglected them. Of course, we made them aware that we were not using the school systems project, whatever their results, but we're starting from the beginning. And Mr. City Manager, this is what I'm going to say. When we had that meeting there, I would hope that when your staff comes, they will come serious about talking to citizens about their welfare. First, they were not truly prepared like they should have been. So the citizens felt it was just a haphazard something that they were doing. They did not give them any written handouts or any kind of report. And Mr. Turner, as the person over that, you will please monitor the staff that you're working with and let them and anyone else know that the public there have been very patient, and I feel that as a taxpayer, that they deserve all kinds of respect and consideration, and it's no plaything, Mr. City Manager. They did not show them the kind of meeting that they had, which was sort of embarrassing. You were not there. So I hope the next meeting we have with the citizens will let them know that they too matter. They too are important, and that we take seriously their health and their concerns. That's all I wanted to say. So the citizens I represent, they know I care for them.
Okay, thank you. The mayor had a comment.
Yeah,
and then
I
Ms.
certainly
Bessie.
applaud Councilmember Burke for pushing for this. I guess my thought is that at some point, Mr. Turner, I'm hoping we're going to be able to get reimbursed for some of these costs. As I know it's going to be a very complex litigation, I'm sure, but I'm sure we're keeping documents on our cost on that.
We are, and we'll pursue that.
Good.
Mr. Bessie.
Yeah, I just wonder, do we have a policy for more generally when we will conduct well monitoring or testing beyond state DENR requirements? And the reason I raise that is that we're an older industrial city. We're going to have quite a number of potential contamination hotspots and a number of others that have already been identified in other cases. I wonder if we have a policy for when and how we do that.
We do not have such a policy.
I'd like to suggest that it's something that staff should take a look at preparing. This is not likely to be the last time this kind of concern is going to be raised.
Yeah. I'd like to add, and I'll look at the city attorney on this. My feeling is, and by the way, the company that owns the building didn't do the pollution. Let's be sure that that is understood. It's maybe 2 owners ago. But my suspicion is when they bought it, they signed some type of agreement with the state from a brownfields type of whatever. It would be helpful if that is a public document to find out what it is, because I think that would answer a lot of questions as to who will pay for what, when, and where, and how, and that type of stuff. And then it would be helpful at the appropriate time to have a second community meeting. I think that needs to be after we've gotten results in. And okay, maybe a third one then.
We're going to have as many as possible
Yeah.
to let the citizens know that we're deeply concerned about their concerns.
And I'm assuming we'll retest in some of these wells periodically?
It'll depend on the results of the samples that we get, yes, sir.
Okay. I don't know if the tests very much test at the same well. a sample of one can be a sample of one.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Chairman, I used to be regional manager for Diener in the area of the Mooresville, taking in Charlotte and all those other areas. And I want to tell you, and Mr. City Manager, we can be very, very understanding that the citizens have not cried out like some citizens would have cried out. And years ago, I said to the city manager, even though we have pollution that may be a county or state, it is the citizens who pay the tax dollars that we should be sensitive and concerned about. And I feel very bad. I want you to know this has bothered me greatly because we did not take, it shouldn't have taken the school system to see the problem. And with that fertilizer plant that was there, and as you mentioned, the owners, we made it clear that there was another owner before this owner. And most of that pollution, a lot of it came from that first owner.
Yep, long
who
time
was
ago.
there, long time ago.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve so we can do some more
I move that
drilling?
we approve
Second.
this.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. All right, last consent item is C10. I did not have C8 written down. Did anyone want C8? C10.
Consideration of items relating to parking rates and times of parking rates.
This, Ms. Turner, you're doing double duty today. Can you give us a 1 minute on this one?
Mr. Chairman, this item would provide for an entity that would like to lease spaces over a long-term period at a discount rate in the Fourth Church Chestnut deck to be able to do so. You currently have a provision in your ordinance that allows someone who wants to rent spaces for 25 years, as long as they rent over 400 spaces, to be able to do so. This would lower that to 200 spaces and 22 years. The 22 years is because there's roughly 22 years left on the contract for the ownership of the deck. There is one typo in your council action. There's still a reference to 25 years. We tried to catch all the changes that, or all the references to 25 years and make them 22 years. So in the second paragraph, the last line should refer to 22 years, not 25.
It's my understanding, and this deck was built just prior to Dan and I coming on council. This deck has an unusual ownership relationship. Can you comment on that? Go ahead.
After 20 years, it reverts to to RJR's ownership contingent upon state law about the disposal of public property. There's still a discussion between our attorneys and their attorneys about how that would happen.
And it's my understanding they still own the dirt underneath it. Is that right? Ms. Carmen? Some lawyer had a field day with this. Why don't you explain it to us?
Good afternoon. Yes, that is correct. The ground underneath the deck belongs to RJR, and we are leasing. We have a ground lease for that
For
property.
25 years.
Yes.
Okay, and we have how many years left?
I think it's 22, basically.
22 left. All right. I had one question on this. Do we have any inflation factor in this, or is this just a straight $25 a month forever?
I believe there's an inflation factor associated with it. I'll have to go back and check.
Okay, if you could check between now. Yes, Ms. Burson.
My comment was about rates. I just hope that we're talking about increasing rates, that we're not going to increase any rates as far as parking downtown, because we're trying to motivate people to come downtown and try to keep our rates within reason. Thank you.
Do I have a motion to approve? And by the way, we're lowering this because we don't have so many spaces left, too. Is that
Right.
my understanding?
Right. 200.
Do we have a motion to
I
approve?
move for approval.
Second.
Let me just comment before I call for the vote on this. Mr. Attorney, you raised your hand.
Since they're buying them up front or paying for them up front, there is no inflation.
Oh, they're paying for everything. Okay, so we get the benefit of the cash.
Correct.
Okay. I don't know why we do it, but we do it all the time. But we have this very convoluted structure where, again, it's like the Coliseum. We didn't own the land underneath. We own the building. In this case, they actually get the parking deck back, maybe, depending on the law and this, that, and the other. It just gets awfully complicated. I'll just leave it at that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. That finishes. Dan, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I just, apologies for not getting here at 4:30. I got caught behind an I-40 stoppage of some sort. But I understand that item C1A was discussed and approved, the police district.
Hang a minute. C1A, we pulled that one. No?
No.
Which one was the police substation? Yeah, that's been approved.
Okay,
Would
thank
you like to comment on it?
I'll hold that to the meeting
Okay.
on
No,
next
that's-
Monday night.
The one we held was C2, which had to do with the affordable housing procedures.
Thank you.
Okay. For you folks out there, we're finally getting to what you came here for. We will now go to the general agenda. We'll go to G1.
Consideration of items relating to financial assistance to Herbalife. This item was remanded to Finance Committee by City Council at its May 4th, 2015 meeting.
I was not here at the last month at the Finance Committee when this was discussed. It was sent forward. There were a number of questions raised at the last City Council meeting last week, so I requested the Council send it back to us. We do have in front of us some other information. If everybody can see here, we have some information that was received from Herbalife, and to be honest with you, I have not had a chance to look at it a lot, but it does comment on some of the things that they do and have done in places. Also, at our section is another chart that shows both female, male, minority, and non-minority, and it breaks it out by exempt management. By the way, exempt, the non-HR folks means they don't get paid overtime. They're exempt from overtime is what it technically means. And the difference between exempt management and exempt management non-professional, you may have someone like an attorney that's maybe a one-person operation. That would be an exempt professional non-management. You've got, next column over is line leaders. I'm assuming that's your first line supervisors, and then you have all other, which I would think would be most of your factory workers, and then the last column is total facility. By the way, it shows 374 people working there. And below there is a breakdown. If you look at, and I'll just go to the first column, exempt management, there's 40% minority, then it breaks down the percent of those minorities by category, and it does that all the way across.
Mr.
Is
Chairman,
there any way we can put this on the screen? I'm not going to read every number here.
I'm
Yes,
going
ma'am.
to step out a minute. I'm not going to be voting because when you get something like this, you need to have a chance to review it.
Okay.
But I'm going to be abstaining. Vote. I'll be abstaining, but I
Okay.
have a call.
Yes, ma'am. Go right ahead. Ms. Burke told me before the meeting started she had. Mr. Page, do you want to comment, any comments that you may have? And I'm just getting this.
Yes, these numbers came from the company. I think a couple of things that stand out is they do have 40% total minority employment workforce in the exempt management. So of 75 employees that are exempt management, 30 of those are minorities. The minority group is not quite representative of the overall demographics of Winston-Salem. However, I think the company recognizes that, and they've actually taken steps. If you look at the line leads, which are the first line supervisors, those are the folks that they've hoped to eventually groom into their supervisory positions. But right now, Asian represent about 25% of the total exempt management. African Americans represent 7%. Hispanic Latino represent 5%. And then two or more races represent 1%, as well as American Indian 1%.
Yeah, thank you. Questions, comments? And I know everyone is just getting this for the first time. Ms. Adams, you have anything for you?
Yes. I'm pretty sure everybody has basically seen how I felt about this from the very beginning. And the city has been asking for these types of numbers, I think, for a few months. Again, the report kind of reflects what I thought it would, that it does not mirror the diversity of our community. Now, I did receive a very long email from a gentleman, I don't know his name, basically saying from his perspective that diversity doesn't really matter. Diversity only matters when it comes to, he said, whether they have enough electricians, whether they have enough plumbers, whether they have enough technical people. But for me, I disagree with that. I believe that when, again, we're talking about how our tax dollars money is spent, that if we're continuing to fund businesses and development and other things that are economic development initiatives, community development is a byproduct of it. But somehow or another, again, I'm hoping that they will give us a performance improvement plan, Chairman Clark, as to how they hope to work on this. I have heard the comments that, we don't have, and we heard this with MR, and we hear this all the time about Wake Forest and the Innovation Quarter. And we continue to hear this because what we've done is we reinvented ourselves. We're no longer manufacturing when it comes to tobacco, furniture, and textile. We're innovation, technology. My issue with this is, as a whole, the city is just as much at fault, is we are now allowing, we got an almost gated community that our people in the urban core and the poor can't afford to live there. And now we're creating a workforce that's like Silicon Valley, that our poor people, our people that live in the urban core, minorities, cannot qualify to even get a job that their tax dollars are helping to fund. I have been said to be throwing, quote unquote, urban life maybe under the bus or using them as a poster child. I'm not doing that. I'm just calling attention to an issue that, again, America, North Carolina, Winston-Salem, we need to address. We cannot continue to do business that we've been doing unless we are now willing to have those conversations that we don't want to have. Now, for those folk that say she is against economic development, she is against people developing their projects downtown and bringing business, that is not the way it is. I refuse to be a part, going forward, anything that does not include the people in this town that look to us every day to hopefully provide them a quality of life opportunity. That's where I am on this. So I will not be voting on this. I'm abstaining.
Mr. Montgomery, then Mr. Mayor.
Yes, my comments are just the fact that Councilman Adams is not alone in the questioning and asking of information. I think that the questions that are being asked are legitimate questions, and the responses to these questions, I believe, are responses that should come very easily in terms of when they're requested. When we look at dollars being invested in helping a business come to our community or make an investment, we do look at the larger impact that has from all of the jobs that are coming in, the capital investments that are being made in those facilities and those buildings. But when you begin to ask the question of a workforce and the employability of a community, and you have individuals who are qualified not just for the line jobs but also for the management jobs, there has to be that question when we're supporting those businesses of saying, does this mirror what the community looks like? And I think that's a genuine question, and I think it's a question that should be asked. And if anybody's offended by that, I do not apologize for that, because that's I believe a question that should be asked by those who sit here as well as the community, to ask those questions and to get the answers, and if we don't like the answers, to respond and act accordingly in reference to what we see. I believe that what's been done and how this agreement is formed in terms of the investments, I have no question in that the financial pieces of what we're doing and what we're going to get out of this project for the dollars being invested across the board, those pieces of it are tight. I think that the staff has done a good job in forming that, but these pieces in terms of looking at those who actually get the jobs is a part of the entire conversation as well.
Mr. Jones?
Thank you. I just want to thank the colleagues for their work on this. I know Councilmember Adams spent a lot of time on it the last couple of weeks. I had a couple of conversations with Herbalife California, and I think they're providing this information is appropriate. I think it demonstrates that they have got a good program in place. They're not where they want to be, obviously, in some of these categories. But they identified to me a plan, particularly with the line leads, where 48% of those line leads are African American, that those would be the group they'd be looking towards moving up there. So I think with a plan in place that they will be, they know that they want to be addressing these issues. And I think I thank Herbalife for their willingness to invest in our community and their willingness to share this and work with us in a cooperative manner.
Okay, any other questions, comments, Ms. Adams?
One more comment.
Yeah.
Again, as I've communicated with the Herbalife people, their representatives, this is not personal, and this is not an affront or an attack on them. These are the questions, and I stand up. I was remiss. I should have been asking this question 6 years ago with everyone. I don't think, at this point where we are, my colleagues and I, again, we're at a point and a juncture where we're going to have to start having these difficult conversations, because I want to keep telling you and helping remind you, revenues from other places are going and gone. Federal, Mr. Page in Economic Development can tell you that, state, everybody are scrambling to find ways to create these economic development projects, and everybody knows that municipalities and counties right now, we are the star child of where they can get assistance. Again, I've asked for a performance improvement plan, and I've directed or asked staff. Going forward, as Councilmember Montgomery said, I will be asking for this information as Mr. Bessie does on the net new jobs and taxes. I will be always asking about the diversity numbers. Some people said, well, there won't be any numbers, Councilmember, at the very beginning. I know that. But just like you follow a business project or a business plan, I expect 3-4 months down the road, once they begin to hire people, I expect to see some type of data that indicates to me that the quote-unquote good faith effort that we asked them to make, that they are truly being held to the good faith effort that they said they would do. That's all I'm saying. So I look at this as being very positive, Chairman Clark, Mayor, and Council. I think we're going in the right direction to helping our citizens understand, as Ms. Burke say, that they matter too. Okay?
Okay, if I could suggest, just here in the comments, that we send this forward without recommendation, since I hear this is new data for everybody, give everybody time to digest, and that we will be back on the agenda for Monday night.
Okay.
Does that sound okay to everybody? Can I get a motion to that effect? To send it forward without recommendation?
I move that we send this resolution G1 forward without a recommendation from the
Second.
committee.
Okay, we have a motion, a second, to send it back to the full committee next week without recommendation, and I'll go all in favor, opposed, and abstain. All in favor, say aye.
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 I'm saying aye to send it to the,
Yeah. Well, the motion is to send it without recommendation.
we send it.
So we have 3 ayes, no, and abstaining. So I'm hearing 4-0. Just want to be sure we get the vote right.
Correct.
So that will be back on the agenda next week with that. We will now go to G2.
Continued discussion on Center City West parking deck. This item was continued from the February and March meetings of the Finance Committee.
Mr. Turner, I guess you'd be the one. I would like a presentation on this. This came to the committee 2 months ago.
Yeah.
We've held it. It took us that long to get all the data. And there were a number of questions that came up at that time, and I think staff's done a pretty good job of getting them back to us. With one exception, there were so many fine print pages, there were too many to read, so if you'll identify which ones that apply just to this deck would be helpful.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman,
I'll
there's
turn
a
it over
handout
to
at, Mr. Chairman, there's a handout at your places that replaces.
Wait a minute, let me. Got it, excuse me. Okay, now, Mr. Turner, continue.
And that handout replaces all the financial tables that were put in your package that you don't really need. This handout actually has 2 financial tables as well as a graph, and I'll tell you about those in a second. But the committee asked for information on the financials for the deck. It also asked for information on the appraised value for the deck. In your package, in the actual agenda book, you'll see that we had the deck appraised 3 different ways: a cost approach, a sales comparison approach, and an income approach. We also asked the appraiser which one of those 3 is the best representative of the market value for the debt. And he advises that the sales comparison approach is the best indicator of true market value, and that value was $2.125 million. You also asked for information on other parking decks, and we've provided that. The Cherry Marshall parking deck sold in 2012 for approximately $3,600 per space, and the Triad Park deck sold also in 2012 for $2,860 per space, approximately. There's a obviously a proposal in front of you to sell the Center City West deck for roughly $2 million, and that would equate to $2,740 per space.
Would you comment on the relationship with Wells Fargo on the put option?
There is a correction to the information we provided before. Wells Fargo, we thought, had a option to purchase. The way the contract is written, the city has the option to require them to purchase at a cost of $2 million or a formula value that calculates the net value minus the net cost. Or, I'm sorry, the net cost of constructing it minus the net revenues received since the project was constructed.
It's the lesser of the two, right?
The lesser of the two.
Is the $2 million the lesser of the two, we think?
The $2 million is the greater of the two.
So the put could actually, it would actually maybe be less than that if this category B was less than that.
I believe so.
Okay. All right. I think you're also in here that you have not the attendance, the usage of the deck is in here that was asked for. Hang on a minute.
Yeah, we calculated the usage of the deck based upon some typical days.
Yeah.
And as you can see from the table on page 14, the usage is in the range of 8 to 11%. Now, that's obviously very poor usage. We do have revenue that comes from Wells Fargo under the terms of the contract that pays us for 530 spaces regardless of use.
Do we know what that revenue is?
Yes, that should be in your table, and it's operating revenues. If you look at the handout that we gave you, labeled G2 Parking Fund Center City West Cash Flow Projections,
Yeah.
you see 5,000 projected for 2019,
Yeah.
and you see 358,000 projected for 2018. The difference is Wells Fargo.
Okay, but it's running about $500,000 now. I expect 2018 may be a partial year. Maybe the contract runs out partial.
I'm sorry, you're
it's about
correct.
$500,000 right now.
500,000 is total revenue for Wells Fargo.
Oh,
Correct.
so it's about $500,000 a year right now for the next 2.5 years.
Yes.
And then the last question that I think you answered that was in here, bear with me 1 minute. Oh, the cash flow, we do have a parking deck fund that all the money that goes in and comes out to fund our parking decks, and I think there's a chart, folks, that was part of the attachment we got.
Correct. There's a
Can you
line
go over
graph.
that? Go over that, please.
There's a line graph that shows two scenarios. In blue, it shows what would happen if we sold the deck to the parking fund, and in red, it shows what happens if we retain the deck to the overall parking fund. And as you can see from the graph, it goes negative, the red line, between 2018 and 2019.
And goes further down, red.
Continues to go down. The blue graph stays in the black, if you will. It stays above zero until at least 2021.
Okay. Do you have any questions, comments? Ms. Montgomery, I'll start with you.
I was looking for the dollar amount that was in here last time in terms of what was the proposed sell amount that we were discussing before.
The dollar amount was what it would take to defease the debt on the deck, and that was roughly $2 million if it sold in March, I believe. Obviously, that hasn't happened, so the longer the city retains ownership of it, the less the value required to defease the debt.
Good. Ms. Saunders, you back there? Could you comment on that? He used a real technical term. I'm not sure what it means. I do, but some of the other folks may not. So just covers all here. I'm not sure what he means by that. Would you comment on the debt and all that?
When we did the calculation back in the spring, it would have taken $1.8 million to defease it, plus issuance cost would have been around $2 million. Basically, they're non-callable bonds. They are non-callable bonds. So you actually have to raise enough money to put it into an escrow account so the bondholder can continue to be paid off over a period of time. However, we do have another principal payment coming June 1 of close to $500,000, so that will actually reduce that amount.
Okay. All righty. Mr. Montgomery, do you have more questions at the time? Okay.
No.
We'll go to Ms. Adams.
Thank you. And maybe it's in here, I just didn't see it. What, if we sold it, what would be the tax? Would they pay taxes on this debt? And what would that roughly be like, probably, Mr. Turner?
Yes, ma'am, they would pay taxes, and I think we provided that in one of the previous packages. Sale of the deck for $2 million would equate to about $10,800.
Thank you.
Per year for sale, for property tax. Okay. Any other, Ms. Burke, you have a question?
I was going to ask Mr. Turner to explain the red and blue line again. Something he said I didn't
Okay. Ms. Turner, if you comment on that.
Certainly. The parking deck is obviously part of an overall system of parking facilities that the city has. All of those parking facilities are managed, or their finances are managed out of a parking fund. And what the two graph lines are indicating is what the parking fund would look like, how much revenue it would have, or how much income it would have if we sold the deck versus if we didn't sell the deck, looking at a period from 2014 through 2021. And what it's saying is that selling the deck stabilizes the fund and keeps it above zero through at least 2021.
Ms. Burke,
Yes,
go ahead.
and also, when we give reports, Mr. City Manager, the question that was asked about the taxes that we would get on a piece of property, I think that helps, as I said years ago when Mr. Jones used to give reports, give it all, so a taxpayer can see, is it an advantage to keep it or let it go, and then what you're going to make from it. So that she brings to the attention is very meaningful. Again, tell me, Mr. Turner, what kind of tax?
10,800.
10,800 at $2 million.
I heard it. I wanted
Excuse
him
me.
to give it again.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Somebody else may not have heard it too clear.
Go ahead.
10,000, what was it?
The information I gave before was that selling the deck at $2 million, if it was valued at that by the tax office, would generate $10,800 in tax revenue annually. In addition, as you recall, this parking deck sale is contingent upon a development of a $12 million site, and if that happened, that would generate $64,800 in tax revenue for a total of $75,000 in revenue.
And that, Mr.
Yes, ma'am.
is very important, and a taxpayer can better understand when we talk about what we're going to do with something that they own, we can show down the road that we're not going to lose.
Yeah.
We're gonna make something.
I had a couple other hands up. Mayor, go ahead.
Mr. Turner kind of made my point. Basically, we've got an appraisal, $2,100,000 is the value. If we don't sell it, it's going to go negative big time in 2019. We start losing in excess of $250,000 a year. So if you take away that loss and add back the $75,000 we're going to net from this project plus the office project up the street there, the citizens of Winston-Salem would be better served by us moving forward with selling this deck. I would encourage us to go ahead and start the process.
Okay, Mr.
I ran the same math that the mayor did, and I agree with him 100%. It seems like the other party that's going to do real well in this is Wells Fargo. They're going to get out of paying. They're on the hook right now for a lot.
Yeah.
Any way we can extract some of that in a contractually to let them off the hook? I mean, but they're coming out real well.
Ms. Montgomery had another comment.
I do. All of my concerns and questions aren't necessarily just clear just based on looking at this. And the reason they are is what I asked at the last meeting was looking at the dollars and cents of what's the best option. The development, I think, is going to be a great development. I think it's something that's going to continue to make that part of our city grow and develop. But from a taxpayer standpoint, when we look at the $75,000 in new tax dollars that'll be created from the project, as well as which is a total of the 10,000 and the 64. When we look at the potential, and I don't know if that's even been a conversation of leasing these spaces back over a long-term period of time back to the developer, do we get more money in that scenario over the same time period? And based upon just a few numbers I looked at, that's more than $75,000 over the course of a year. And I don't know, have we actually had that conversation? And is that an option?
We have talked to the developer about the possibility of leasing, and his question to me was, at what rate? So the key is there'd have to be negotiation on what the rate would be, and that we have not done yet.
Mr. Reese, you're here. Would you like to comment on anything? I don't want you to feel like you're being left out. If you'll give your name and address for the record, please.
John Reese, 751 West 4th Street. Thank you, Mayor and council members. The lease concept was just proposed about an hour ago, so I haven't really given that a whole lot of thought. So in addition to rate, it would also be term. And term may be more important than rate, because what banks are looking for, what tenants are going to be looking for, is how long can I give them a commitment that there would be parking spaces available.
What type of time frame would you need then? 30, 40 years, something like that?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Mayor?
No, thank you, Mr. Reeves. I appreciate your. I think the thing we also got to keep in mind, this deck is getting some age on it. So
Yep.
you can look at the lease payments coming in certainly, but somebody's going to spend some money on it. And even though we're retiring the principal debt on there, we're going to come back and add additional debt to bring it up to speed and keep it structurally sound, just like has happened at Cherry Marshall and other places.
Yeah. If I could suggest to the committee, since this was just for information, I think as a next step, two things. One is to have the staff put together a specific motion as far as selling it, and this would be for an upset bid. It would have in there a sales price, it would have conditions of the sale, those type things. I think we also need to address, to the extent that we can, the issue of usage on ball game nights and maybe Friday, Saturday nights for maybe general parking and maybe just the first level or something. I've only been in the deck once, so I really don't know it very well. So number one is to have the staff put together something that we could vote on as far as the sale, and number two is to get back with the developer again and come up with some type of lease arrangement as well. So those two, and I'm looking for fairly specific documents, and I am concerned with the lease more than anything on the condition. I will tell you right now, I can't imagine what it costs to bring the Cherry Marshall deck up to proper code, as bad as that thing was. And I would think that the bank's going to want at least 30 to 40 years. In 30, 40 years, we may well have to rebuild the deck. Who knows? But anyway, let's look at both of them. I'm not really going to ask an opinion here tonight. Let's look at both of them, and then we need something we can respond to. This was just more information. Mr. Montgomery.
It's for me. It's looking at just the bare bones dollar and cents is what I'm looking at, and comparing the what we're going to get the information back on what capital improvements may need to be made on it over the course of a period of time, based upon where that deck stands today and what capital improvements may need to be made in the future. We're in a place now where I think it's feasible to begin to chart that course if we were maintaining ownership of that. Because what we don't want is when we sell the deck, and not to say Mr. Reese and the developers will do this, but 20 years down the road, you come back and have a conversation, well, we need the investment in the deck, and we end up playing a role in a party in doing some of those things, because that's not unheard of. That's the conversation, things that have happened in the past. So if we do sell it, we're going to stand clear totally of being able to be a part of those type of investments or not. And then on that side, what is truly the best opportunity for taxpayers? Being able to have a project that moves forward, that creates new tax dollars in the community, as well as additional revenue in a deck that's leased, or that, if it's feasible, it may not be, and we may come and see that that's not feasible to help the project move forward. But we have a responsibility, I think, to look at all of those pieces.
Okay. Mr. McIntosh, you had your hand up.
And when we get that information back, I'd like to see what really a true bottom line net income is, figuring in an amortized cost of essentially rebuilding the deck when we have to rebuild the deck. Because either we set it aside or we come out of pocket a chunk later. But that's a real cost, setting aside that future maintenance, future rebuild cost.
And also, I think it would be appropriate to address the surface parking behind it, maybe to the extent to say it's not included, but I think it needs to have some wording in there on it. There's probably 30 spaces behind there, 40? How many? 80. That was going to be my next guess. And again, it's not included, but we need to be sure that's specified.
There is, when that deck was built, the deck itself is not ADA compliant.
Yeah.
So that back parking lot on Holly Avenue side is what was used for ADA compliance. So I'm not sure we can split them.
Okay, that's the type of stuff we need in there. Okay?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to say we have really come a long ways when you look at Broad and Fourth down there was, the parking we have apartments, then you look at Broad. And to Mr. Reeves, it seems like it's what we're doing, but I appreciate you with the economy like it is, that you would move forward. So just stay on in here.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, so, Mr. Reese, you hear that next month, we hope to have two very specific proposals, because there's nothing in here for any type of motion today. Okay, G3, if you'll read that, please.
Consideration of amendments to fiscal year 2014-2015 budget ordinances for the city of Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
Would someone like to comment on, I don't see Mr. Minor in unless he's hiding.
I believe the city attorney was going to.
City attorney's going to talk on this, all right?
Yeah. I am going to address, I guess, G3C. Is that the one?
G3. Yes. Just G3. It has to do with the police department federal forfeiture funds from the United States Department of Justice.
Okay, I believe that's another staff member.
Councilmember Clark, it's a budget amendment. It has 3 ordinances attached. The only reason we put it on the general agenda was because of G3C.
Oh, okay.
That.
Okay, do we have any questions on G3A and B? Then we'll go to G3, which has to do with the housing finance assistance. Is that?
Yeah, can we approve those first two?
Sure. You can go ahead and do that. Yes.
Do I have a motion to approve G3A and B?
Move for approval.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. So we will now go to G3C, and I think it is commented on page 60 is the write-up on it. So
that's correct.
Continue, please.
As you may recall, the CDBG funding for FY 14-15 for the Bethesda Center was actually approved between April and June of last year, well in advance of the appointment of Councilmember Montgomery as the Executive Director of the Bethesda Center. But because funds have not been dispersed, and disbursement will occur after that appointment, we had to request a conflicts waiver from HUD. That request is still pending. However, the funds still need to be dispersed. Mm-hmm. Because that request is pending, I advise staff not to disperse the CDBG funding, because that, based upon my communications with HUD, would not be appropriate considering the request is still pending. So this item now is to substitute housing finance funds for the CDBG funding while they're still, I guess, reviewing the request. And Councilmember Montgomery, of course, will abstain and ask to be excused Monday from voting on the item. But this funding source now is non-federal funding, it's local.
Okay, are there any questions or comments? I'm assuming staff is comfortable with this. This is a little bit outside my area of expertise. Do we have a motion to approve?
I move for approval of GC3.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed and abstaining. So we have 3 in favor, none opposed, and 1 abstaining. Thank you very much. And Mr. Montgomery, you'll have to ask to be excused from voting for the big guy Monday night. Okay, G4. Secretary, read that, please.
Brookstown Development, Phase 2, request for assistance.
This is a very big item. Mr. Page, are you going to do the presentation?
Yes, I'm going to kick it off, Chairman Clark. And actually, today's just for informational purposes, to sort of give you all an introduction.
Before you say anything, we do have technically 12 minutes. Mr. Taylor is not actually here, so I know if he was, he would give us a few more minutes from the public safety. So with that, we'll maybe go at least till 5 or 10 after.
The vice chair is here. I don't know if we're going to do that.
I didn't know who that is, so I can't call on him. Anyway, go ahead. Excuse me.
And we do have Brian Morgan here today from Atlanta with his team, and I'll have him come up in just a minute and sort of give a presentation or overview of the project. But you may recall seeing an article in the paper this past week regarding the request from Brand Properties and Real Estate Investment Group to exercise a provision in the original Brookstown Development Agreement related to a parking facility. And under that provision, the city committed to purchase up to 1,000 parking spaces pursuant to authorization or approval by City Council, and also contingent upon all of those parking spaces had to be self-financing.
we agreed to spend up to $16,340,000 to purchase those spaces, and under self-financing, it had to be demonstrated in one of several ways, either through the new tax increment that was generated by a project that was created, through things such as parking fees, ticket surcharges, or other revenues that could be identified, but they had to be coming from the project, and the project had to be self-financing. So that's sort of the big picture of why Mr. Morgan is here. I'll turn it over to him to sort of talk about the concept and then the next steps as we go forward. At this point, we're not prepared to talk about financing because we're still having the conversations as to how do we get the numbers to work.
Okay. Mr. Brand, if you give your name and address for the record, please.
Sure. It's Brian Morgan, 3328 Peachtree Road, Atlanta, Georgia. Well, thank y'all for having me. It's an exciting time to be in front of y'all. Let me start by giving you an overview of the project that we've been working on for almost a year now. You can see the baseball stadium over the mayor's shoulder, and the north deck is the one on the right side of the page, and then the south deck is on the left side of the page. We've designed approximately 1,000 spaces, 400 spaces being in the north deck, and about 600 spaces being in the south deck. As you can see, the north deck is wrapped by residential flats. We have about 250 units designed that wrap the northern deck. Plus, we've designed a grocery store anchor that will be on the corner of Peters Creek and First Street. And then we've also wrapped underneath the residential units approximately 30,000 square feet of retail. If you look down the first baseline, it's all around the corner. It's nipped off. So, yeah. If you can imagine yourself standing at home plate, about to run to first base, you'd run straight out of the outfield into the office building, which is about 110,000 square feet. And the southern deck services the office building and also patrons that would attend the game on any given evening. So we have about 8 acres in phase one. It totals $96 million of development. 16 million of that would be the parking decks. And then phase two is approximately another 80 to 90 million, which is another 8 acres on the other side of the road. With that, let me open it up and love to answer any questions y'all may have.
Can you show where phase two is? Is it down
Sure.
here then?
It's, we may have another board. Michael, you mind see if we can find the aerial? It's across First Street, North Green Street. Correct. So it's mainly to the north and somewhat to the
But this is all
east.
phase one you have here.
Correct. This is what we've underwritten, and as Derwick mentioned, that's great, you can put that up. As Derwick mentioned, the incremental tax revenue created from this project would service the debt, which we've worked with the city on to amortize over 20 years.
Okay. I saw a number of hands go up. Molly, your hand was up first. I'll just start you and go around.
Actually, my question was answered.
All right, we'll go around. Jeff, do you have a question?
No, I'm extremely excited about this. I mean, this is what I think we all had in mind at the beginning of the ballpark project. Seeing it come to fruition is just tremendous. I think it just is going to positively impact everything around it. West Salem, Holly Avenue, West End. I think people are going to be very pleased with the program. And also, I talked with folks from the Dash about how the pedestrian aspect of it, tying the multi-use pathway into it, the pedestrian pathway over Green Street. I mean, it's all starting to fall into place. I mean, I'm so excited about it. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Dan?
I'm waiting to hear the numbers. In my opinion, if the numbers and the risk factors don't work, I can't support it. I'm waiting to hear the numbers.
Numbers, okay. Mr. Mayor?
I just agree with Councilor McIntosh and thank Mr. Morgan for your willingness to look at Winston-Salem for a extraordinarily exciting project. You've done this a couple of times already around baseball stadiums, so you know what you're doing. And I think I'm really pleased with the double use of our parking spaces because we're ringing out maybe 2 or 3 uses of them with residential, with office and retail and baseball. So I think it's a very smart and efficient way of doing it there. This is not something that's unexpected. When the city did the project back in '05, we said we would build a deck at such time as the project comes along if it paid for itself. And so I think the answer to those 2 questions are yes. So thank you.
Great.
Ms. Montgomery? Okay. Ms. Adams?
I think this is great. I'm glad, hopefully, we'll be able to finish the project in its entirety and we'll have another piece of good landscape or views of Winston-Salem. But on page 71, where we had some questions that some of us had posed, basically, again, unfortunately but fortunately, colleagues, we're running back to where we were before. It all boils down to, and again, you're going to hear this every time now we move to this, I see where they included the comments about the workforce housing, and the developer said he'd meet with the city, our staff, to see if they can make the numbers work. And I also see at the bottom, again, that good faith clause that we're asking them to make sure they use minorities and women and businesses. But again, going forward, in the past, we took that as a good faith. I'd like to see some numbers. We've done a lot of projects in this city that said that, okay, we'll use your minority business and women, and we took it good faith, and I'm not saying nobody didn't do what they said they were going to do, but going forward, for Councilmember Adams, I got to see the numbers on that going forward, and we need to know how staff is going to come out, Mr. Page, on the workforce housing. Okay, I'm like Mr. Best.
Okay, we'll go around Ms. Burke.
I agree
Anyway,
with
Ms. Taylor, we're on the ballpark. G4. Excuse me. Go ahead, Ms. Burke. Sorry.
Thank you. I agree with Councilmember Adams, and if you would go back and check the records where there was a private meeting we were having, I've always spoken about the diversity, let it mirror the city and what we do. Also, anytime we have business people coming, we do appreciate you. Don't
Yes, we do.
understand that because economic development is important, but the accountability that you have with tax dollars, there are certain expectations that they have. And I just think that, as I've said to the city manager, your staff needs to be stronger. It needs to be stronger. And it hadn't been this real project, but other projects. And so I'm glad to see that the colleagues are hearing and moving forward to understand that let it mirror the city and let us be fair across the board.
Mr. Montgomery had his hand up next.
Yes, just the comments. I know, Mr. Morgan, you heard the dialogue in the beginning of this meeting in reference to when we were talking about workforce housing, that kind of stuff. And we all know, sitting around the table, that this project in particular is a very tight project in terms of being able to put those pieces of the puzzle together. But I will really be paying attention to the financial pieces of what we're looking at, as well as what opportunities may present themselves for some type of inclusion, and understanding in this whole conversation, sometimes there are carrots in the process of making that work. If we're as a city are dedicated
Absolutely.
to making that happen, sometimes we have to make it happen, and that means being a part of it in ways to help make that happen. And so I'm interested to see how that comes together.
Ms. Light, you had your hand up.
On the lighter side, my phone has been ringing off the hook since this was announced in the paper. Folks from West Salem, we want a grocery store, we want a grocery store. So a whole segment of Winston-Salem is very excited about that.
Well, thank you.
Okay. Let me ask, and I'll address this to Mr. Page and Mr. Morgan. When do you think the numbers will be available, so to speak? How far along? And because I know that this is a complicated deal.
Correct. Our first step was sort of get direction and support from Finance Committee to have those conversations. We've had some preliminary conversations with Mr. Morgan. It's just a matter of now we need to sit down and start sharpening our pencil. He needs to sharpen his pencil and figure out what we can do to make the deal work.
Okay.
Hopefully we'll be able to bring something back as soon as June for you all to at least get the first glance at, here are the numbers.
Okay. And let me say this, because the question has been raised about the workforce housing. As you were listening earlier, we have remanded that back to staff to come back with some more specifics. So hopefully by the time yours comes back, we'll have a policy in place maybe, so that we can, well, I'll give you, because we need some meat there as well.
Well, I wouldn't want us to wait till we get that policy back. I hope that there will be some conversations prior to then in reference to this in terms of, because based upon what I'm looking at on this piece, we would not, this project wouldn't necessarily qualify under this standard because we'd be working specifically with the parking deck and not necessarily investments in the housing.
Right.
And so there may be something else that we need to look at in terms of how that may work.
All right. So you think 30 to 60 days we can have some more specifics?
Yeah.
That's my goal.
Okay.
We'll shoot for 30.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was going to say our city has made such a giant step with development. It was a dead city at one time. And I've said to the city manager, I don't think you do enough to show the taxpayers and visitors how we look. And that area where you were talking about, it was just a drab, rundown place. And if you can bring your figures together, and they can, I think it's something that we need to have. We have a ballpark, and taxpayers feel good because they'll think and feel that we're going to be able to pay them back their tax dollars
Okay.
for that reinvestment.
Let me just comment to both of you and the staff that I think we're going to need a lot of numbers because this is a very complicated deal.
It is.
And we're going to need a lot of numbers there. And to bring it back at the appropriate time when you got all your numbers together. Mr. Bessie.
Yeah, just to clarify a bit more, I'm interested in seeing details and specifics and analyses in part because the proposal would call for us to purchase the parking deck and own it. And that is a risk factor for the taxpayers. I want to be assured that that is a good risk. And if I'm not assured that it's a good risk, then I don't think it's a good deal. So I think we need to get that assurance in whatever means are available. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, to reiterate to the staff, we're going to get a detailed proposal on both renting and selling at a bid process, the parking deck on 4th Street. We're going to get some more meat in details into the workforce housing, and you folks are going to all get together in the appropriate time, come back to us.
Sounds good.
Is that all right?
Thank you.
Anything else to bring before the Finance Committee tonight? Mr. Taylor, we're going to be finished about on time. Anything else to bring anybody? With that, we'll be adjourned, and the public safety will start at
in 5 minutes.
In 5 minutes, around 6:07.